Hello, and welcome to Lead What You Live podcast with Tina Lizzio. And I have a very, very special guest with me today, Dr. Lauren Schwartz. Dr. Lauren Schwartz is one of the few female board-certified neurosurgeons in the country. And we are going to go on an incredible journey with her today. I met Lauren. We are in a mastermind together. And I was so impressed and inspired by how she leads what she lives. And so we're going to get into that today. So welcome, Dr. Lauren Schwartz, to Lead What You Live.
Thank you, Tina. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm a big fan of yours, and this is quite an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Lauren, we're going to go on a journey. Tell us where it all began. How does one become a brain surgeon, a pediatric neurosurgeon, and all of your specialties? I know that you grew up in Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania?
Yes, that's correct. Right about 45 minutes from Philadelphia. Yeah. And I am the oldest. I have 3 brothers that are younger than I am, and my father was a physician as well. He was a family practice doctor. In those days, they did everything. So he did ENT, and he did OB, and he delivered babies. And at a young age, I was just so impressed that my father, just at a minute's notice, would have to run off to go deliver a baby. And as cool as that was, it was also a little bit difficult as a daughter because, I was pitching in the championship, softball game as like 12-year-old girl, and my father would have to run out and go deliver a baby. But the sadness I felt at times missing my father, I was so fascinated that he meant something so important to people, and he was bringing lives into this world. So I think that was my first impression of what a doctor does. And my mother was so supportive of him. My parents just so in love and just had such a good childhood. And I asked my mother, who's in her 90s now, what was the success? What's the secret to your marriage? And she said we had pride in each other. And so I think that feeling to help others and to mean something started with my observations of my father.
Absolutely.
His work.
Wow. And so that was your initial inspiration. So not only is your father, an inspiration, but also the relationship between your mother and father. And what commitment looks like personally and professionally. So certainly he was somebody who was leading what he lived and an example to the family, to you and your brothers.
Yes.
And so when was the first thought for you to actually become a doctor?
So when I was 10 years old, I decided I was going to be a neurosurgeon. And it's not a story I share that often, but my brother, who's a year younger than I am, we decided that it'd be really cool if we could find pictures of naked people. And we know my dad kept his medical journals in the bathroom. So we snuck into the bathroom, and we were looking for pictures of naked people in the medical journals. But what I found instead was a woman, neurosurgeon from Japan. And it was the cover of the journal, and there was a clock in the picture, and she was on these steps, because when you're a little shorter, you operate on like steps. And it just caught my eye as a 10-year-old. So I took the journal back to my bedroom, and I had a dictionary, and I barely understood the words. But it was about this woman who was clipping an aneurysm of the brain that ruptured. And when you do these aneurysms, these blood vessel malformations of the brain, you oftentimes have to cut off the circulation to that part of the brain to stop the bleeding through the aneurysm to fix it. Okay, of course I didn't know that when I was 10. And she was describing the clock. And you have maybe 10 minutes to shut off the circulation before the patient has a stroke and dies.
Wow.
And I was reading these words with my dictionary. My heart was just pounding away. And my mother was calling me for dinner. I did not hear it. And it was like living this experience. And when I finally heard my mother calling me for dinner, I came downstairs. I threw the journal on the table. I said, "Mom, this is what I'm going to be when I grow up." She's like, "Okay, honey, the mashed potatoes are cold." And, since I was 10, I looked for other things. I didn't realize what being a neurosurgeon was and how much work was involved and anything like that. I just knew that this was my calling in life, was to help people with brain disease survive. And my road through my studies, it just always contained neurosurgery. I could not find anything else that captured me like neurosurgery.
In the medical space. And so you're following your undergraduate, and it is quite a journey, like 18 years to get to the level beyond high school to become actually the specialty of brain surgery. I believe you also do pediatric craniofacial surgery, tumors. You were talking about aneurysms and the intensity. I have incredible respect for what you do. Tell us how your experience was. So you make the decision, you go to college, you take the MCATs, and then what happened?
So I was very fortunate to go to the college I went to. I wasn't planning to go there. My father said, just go interview. It's near Philadelphia, and it was Bryn Mawr College, which is one of the Seven Sisters. And I never, growing up with three boys, I never really felt any different being a female. And when I got to Bryn Mawr, I just saw these powerful women. And it turned out the first three female neurosurgeons had all gone to Bryn Mawr at some point. And of course, our most famous alum is Katharine Hepburn. And I don't think if I went anywhere else, I would have had the strength and fortitude to go through the training. The training, at least when I went through it, was very, very brutal. The basic theory was that you need to destroy a person and rebuild them as a neurosurgeon. So it's 7 years.
Destroy their being, like a transformation?
It's a transformation, but you have to be humbled, and you have to develop a certain kind of strength. It's very militaristic training because you have to be able to control your emotions at all times, and you also have to be able to focus on a task with unknowns at times and crisis after crisis without being swayed. So you have to be able to really think and not feel. And that's basically what the training does to you. And at the time, it seemed wonderful. It's like, you pound your chest and you think it's great, but it does lead to problems down the road when you shut off your feelings. And so I think nowadays, when I speak to medical students and pre-med students and doctors, and even in my own specialty, I try to focus on feeling and a well-rounded person, not just a neurosurgeon, but also, a mother, a sister, a daughter, if you're a male, a husband. There's so many other things in life that when you exclude things, which was our training at the time, you can't interact and you don't really become the best doctor you can be.
So it sounds like, being connected to feeling actually increases the muscle of intuition.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
So when we are more connected to our feelings, in fact, we're more intuitive. So in real time, while we are controlling our emotions, there's life and death literally on the line, but there's an intuition that comes from being more connected.
Correct. And it's even a deeper connection, whether you believe in God or the universe. There's a time, especially in surgery, that at least I've felt where I feel connected to something bigger than myself. And the decisions come, and you can say it's this developed intuition, you can say the source of experience and compassion and empathy, but there are times where the results that I've accomplished in the operating room are miraculous. And those times I felt a connection to a higher voice, I'll say, where I knew the right things to do, and I knew the right moves to make, and I knew when to do one thing or when to do another. And so I think that we need to really train our physicians, whether they're neurosurgeons, heart surgeons, or even internists, to have this connection with a patient, to have a connection with a higher purpose, and to really let your intuition come out when you think something's wrong and a person's not quite right. Explore it. Don't turn away from it. Lean into it. So I think a lot of these lessons that we learn can be very applicable to becoming a better doctor. And I can give you an example. It's very interesting. When I first moved to Florida, this woman came in with a seizure, and she was 50 years old, and she had a terrible brain tumor called a glioblastoma, and it's in the news a lot now. You know, Ted Kennedy had it, John McCain, and it's a very bad brain tumor. And the life expectancy is anywhere from 3 months to maybe a year, sometimes a little longer. And I went to speak with her, and she said, "Look, you know what? This is terrible. My kid's a freshman. I'd like to just see her graduate high school. Is there any way that I can just see her graduate high school? That's all I want." I said, "Well, I'll do my best." And I said to her, "I can't make any promises, but I can tell you I've seen miracles." And that's all I said. And everybody else was gloom and doom, you know, get your affairs in order, and things like that. And I told her I was going to be a little more aggressive in taking out this tumor and get margins, because I want to try to extend her life. And I did the surgery, went very well. And the thing in neurosurgery is a lot of times after the surgery's done, you hand off the patient, and now they go to an oncologist and radiation, and you don't always have a lot of feedback. But sometimes I just, check the obituaries. I always kind of like wondered what happened to her and some of my other patients. And I get a call a few weeks ago from her husband. And he said, "Hi, Dr. Schwartz. You remember me?" I said, "Of course I do." He said, "Well, I just want to let you know, my wife's here. We're at our daughter's college graduation."
Oh, wow.
And he said to me, "You were the only one that gave her hope. Everyone else said you have 6 months to live." And he said, "I really think that your words and your surgery, your skills," he said, she's like now 6 years out.
Wow.
Yeah, about maybe more. And the tumor never came back.
Amazing.
And so, what is it? Is, luck? What is it? But I feel my whole career has been hope. Not to take never take away people's hope, because there's a way to
Where
survive.
there's a will, there's a way, and
Exactly.
and the hope gives you the will,
Correct.
the will to live.
Absolutely.
And you have so many incredible examples of those miracles, and being guided to, like you said, maybe go a little more aggressive with the margins and removing that tumor, and just being guided in real time. So as a woman, I've a question regarding regulating emotions. So here we are as women, and we go through cycles, and we just naturally, as a result of that, are more emotional beings than men. So what's the added challenge of a woman who goes through every month, cycles, being able to be aware? Is it actually, again, a strength to be that more intuitive with your body and the mental, physical, emotional, connection and to your body in order to regulate those emotions for 10-hour surgeries?
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. Anybody that tells you that men don't have monthly cycles,
Right.
I can tell you, working with mostly men for most of my life, and we spend more time together as neurosurgeons, as residents, than they do with their wives or anybody else. So
Yes.
they definitely go through cycles as well. I think it's interesting because we have to shut down all our function. Men or women, you can't go to the bathroom, you can't eat, and it all leads to this what I call cone of focus. To do what you have to do, because you're dealing with life and death decisions multiple times during a day. So I think the biggest challenge is stamina. And again, stamina, you actually, you have to be healthy, but it also comes from your, obsession with doing the right thing and loving what you do. And I can say, no matter through all the ups and downs I've had, and all of us have going through training like this and the career that I've chosen, is I love every minute of it. Like there's even the hardships, because when you have a goal and you feel a calling, everything else just falls into place. Like I always say, people ask me like, well, what do you think of all the sacrifices to be a neurosurgeon? I always say I never made one sacrifice. I invested. They were
Yes.
investments. They weren't sacrifices. So you do live on a little bit of a fringe of society. The things that we see are not what normal people experiencing life see. But it is such a blessing to be able to do what I do. It truly is.
And saving lives and miracles. You had a lot of, again, you speak of challenges. So for sure, there had to have been many, many challenges along the way. And I surmise that it was mostly men taking this on to go become brain surgeons, neurosurgeons, more than women, because again, at the time you were one of the few. And so what were the challenges that you faced as a woman going through that program? Any major challenges and issues there?
So we didn't have a Me Too movement at the time, and I came out of having three brothers and being an athlete, and then going to Bryn Mawr, where it never seemed limited by gender. That wasn't even a concept to me. And then when I showed up, I trained at the Cleveland Clinic. I got into my first choice. It was an incredible program, and the call schedule came out, and I noticed I was on call every other night, but the other person that was my year was a male, was on every third night. So I did think that was a little bit odd. And the chairman said to me, "Did you happen to see the call schedule?" "Yes, sir, I did." He's like, "Did you notice you were on call every other night?" "Yes, sir, I did." He goes, "That's because you're a girl and you're the weakest link in the chain and you need to prove yourself." At the time, I was like, "Yes, sir." Challenge taken. And, it was very, very difficult. I never realized the challenges based on gender.
Wow.
And it was much rougher for me. And when I met one of my professors many years later at a meeting, he said, "Well, you just wouldn't break." He's like, everybody else broke. And when I say broke, we had residents that, quit. Most over half quit, got into drugs, other things, because it is a harsh existence during the time period. And then I ended up going to Texas for a fellowship in aneurysms. That was my goal, was aneurysm surgery since I was 10. And my whole life was just, geared to being a neurosurgeon. And I went there because there was a man there who was a leader in the field. And I kind of worshipped him. I met him when I interviewed, and he was a cowboy and a Buddhist. And, I was just, I wanted to learn from this man.
Seemed like a cool cat.
Cool cat, very cool cat. And I went there for a few months to do some extra training, and he told me that I was exceptional. He called me and he's like, "I haven't seen this kind of natural talent, since one other person ever." And so I ended up moving to Texas from Cleveland, from this big program, to train under him. And so this was the first real collision in my life where things didn't go as planned. I was there for a couple years, and I was just about to graduate when this gentleman, my mentor at the time, made a sexual advance towards me. And it took me completely by surprise on so many levels. And when I declined, he told me there's no more career for me, no more neurosurgery. So I ended up, he was true to his word. He just let me finish the fellowship, and he blocked me from training. And so it was a real hardship on so many levels, because it was like everything you ever worked for is decimated over something so crazy, just because I was a woman.
His ego was that big and was being rejected.
Right. And also it's another betrayal, because it's like someone you believed in, someone who is
trusted.
What you want to be, who's this master at a craft. So on many levels, it was really, I was really like sucker punched. I didn't know what to do. And I remember when this happened, I actually didn't even know how to tell my parents. I hadn't seen my parents for 2 years because we didn't have a day off in 2 years. So I just threw my jeans, 3 pairs of jeans in my car in Dallas, Texas, and I started driving back to Pennsylvania because I wanted to tell them in person. And at the time, I stopped at my boyfriend's in Nashville and told him, and he was just furious. He wasn't super helpful. And I drove up to Pennsylvania, and I sat outside my house. So I drove for 3 days, and I saw my father taking out the trash. I'm like, how am I going to tell them? How am I going to tell them, And I eventually, after 3 hours, I knocked on the door. My mother answered the door, hadn't seen me for 2 years, and she said to me, "Come on in, I have dinner ready." They didn't ask me anything. I went to bed that night. The next day, my mother's like, "Do you want to talk about it?" And I told her what happened. And my father taught us never to quit. Never quit. That's just something. You don't lie, and you don't quit. And I said, "I don't know what to do. how am I going to be a neurosurgeon? This guy is very famous. He was acting really erratic. And my father came to sat down in my bed at night, and he said, Lauren, why don't you do something else? And I looked at him like, you mean quit? He's like, yeah. He's like, He's like, I know you want to be a neurosurgeon. I know you're great at it. I know you think it's your calling. He's like, but is it worth it? Is it worth dealing with these people?
Wow.
And I was so angry at my father. I'm like, how could he say quit? Like, I felt, my God. But not realizing what he was asking me was to really dedicate myself, to say, you know what? Yes, I'm going to do it, or no, I'm not. And I didn't forgive him for a while for doing that, but I did. What I did was I thought about it. I thought, well, if you have a bully on the playground, like, what do? You get a bigger bully. And so I ended up leaving Dallas because it became very difficult there. And I went to New York, and I met really my hero in life, Dr. Fred Epstein, who, if it weren't for him, I would not be the doctor I am today or the person. And Fred was a master. Fred had dyslexia. He didn't do very well in school. His parents got him into NYU. And he ended up becoming a pediatric neurosurgeon when that wasn't really popular. And he decided he was going to take on inoperable brain tumors. He was going to help children with the worst tumors that basically we would just say go home and die. And this was the man who, when I went to interview for his training program, I didn't tell him all the details. I told him, something personal happened, and he's like, listen, you have to be top notch to train with me. And I said, sir, I am top notch. And I actually did the work of two fellows. The other fellow wasn't really there a lot of the time. And he would watch you operate on a camera in the OR and then come in for the critical parts of the operation. And after about 2 weeks, he called me in his office and he said, Lauren, this is absolutely what you're supposed to be doing. You need to do this. He's like, you're gifted, and this is where you need to be. And so I ended up working with him for over a year and learning the craft and learning how to operate on inoperable tumors and save children's lives. At that time, I met my other mentor, Dr. Gene Flam, who was the chairman at Albert Einstein. He saw me operate, said the same thing. He said, Lauren, this is what you need to be doing. Why don't you come finish your training with me? And I'll never forget, he said to me, listen, he was a tough guy, Dr. Flam. He still is. He's still in practice, as far as I know. He said, look, I treat everybody like shit. If you want to come on, I'm going to treat you like shit. I said, I just want to be treated like everybody else. He's like, you got a job. And it turned out that he was much better than the neurosurgeon in Texas. He taught you how to operate. It wasn't smoke. It was not, this like mystery. It was like, this is how we do it. And so I think that when I look back on my life, and I think this is what I want to convey, is that sometimes the things that seem like the worst things that could happen to you, losing everything you worked your life for, and losing relationships and all these other things, in retrospect, can be the best thing that ever happened. Because if that didn't happen to me in Texas, I never would have met Fred and Gene Flam, and I never would have become the master surgeon that I am. And I also would not have learned to overcome adversity, because my life before that, everything kind of played by the book. It was merit-based, and that made sense in my mind. And so I think, and that's what I convey to my patients, that, they encounter these tumors or traumas. I talk to their families, and they have to overcome strokes. And, it's like, there's a way. When you experience being in a pit and being at the bottom of something and climbing out, then you can share that message with others. And so I incorporate that. I lead the way I lived, and I give that to my patients as well, this strength to survive and to have hope and to, just play the game the best we can with whatever cards we're dealt.
That is incredible. And so you went from, aneurysm, wanting to treat aneurysms, to next level inoperable brain tumors.
I actually did both. So I used my career for my training, and my first job was chief of cerebral vascular surgery at Drexel University. So I was an assistant professor at the top of the game. And I was doing incredible cases, not with the support that you always have in the academic world. So
What do you mean by that?
I was a kind of a lone soldier. We didn't have a resident. We didn't have residents yet. We didn't have a lot of the top-notch equipment that you see in the universities. I was at a university, and just had some incredible saves, and I got to live my dream. I was doing 3 to 4 aneurysms a week, which is incredible. I was treating trauma patients, and also children. So I ended up very grateful for the hardship because it made me the person that I am today.
That resiliency
Yes.
and your father testing you. Maybe it was a test to see how committed you were to your calling
It was more,
as well.
yeah, it was a test to commit, just to commit. Like it's easy to commit when everything's going your way, when everybody's praising you, or when even being a pioneer, it's not the best thing. You don't have anybody to look to, but it's still something cool about being a pioneer. But when things don't go your way and you have to commit, and my father sadly passed away a couple years ago, and he was dying. It was during COVID, and he was at my house here in Florida, and I was thinking, like, what do you say? Like, what are the last words you say to someone who has given you life and shaped your life and everything? And the last thing I said to my father was, "Thank you, Dad, for for resilience, for teaching me resilience." And now I'm a mother. I have twin girls that are 4. And
Gorgeous girls, Emerson and Sage. They are cutie patooties.
yeah, I told them today I'd say hi to them on TV. So
Yes.
and I think, like, what is the thing you want to teach your children? And that's resilience, because you can't always be there to watch over them. And to teach resilience, I think that's the key to parenthood, is to love and support, but also to instill a way that no matter what situations you encounter in your life, there's a cloud of love around you, and logic, and you can rely on yourself. Yeah.
Love and logic. I like that. It's love and logic. And so that resilience, it goes back to trust, faith, having hope, trusting intuition, trust in the higher calling, and never quit. Don't quit. And so you went on. What is because again, both children and adult miracles. With children? What would be one of your greater miracle saves for a child?
Well, a lot of being a pediatric neurosurgeon is my concept of justice. And my mentor, Dr. Epstein, would say that no child should ever die. Like, it's just so unfair.
Of course.
So, that's why I do pediatric neurosurgery. And, there are so many saves. Actually, one of the kids I operated on a brain tumor in my training became a doctor. And so that was really fulfilling. And I think, even recently, I had a little girl a couple years ago, who was in the news, who was shot in the head. She was 3 years old, in a road rage incident. And, you can Google it. It's on Inside Edition. It got a lot of press. And I remember when I got a call at 3 in the morning, I was standing up. I jumped out of bed. Like, you just get trained as soon as the phone rings. And they said, a 3-year-old. And I said, you mean 30? They're like, no, a 3-year-old shot in the head.
3-year-olds. Wow.
And, no one really thought she would live. Her mother knows that. She's spoken about it. And I just went in, and maybe there are other doctors that wouldn't have operated. But
Was the bullet still in the head? Or had it gone
yeah,
through?
Well, in general, I can't talk specifically.
Right, okay.
Because of patient confidentiality, I can only repeat kind of what's like in the press.
Right.
But in general, when a bullet penetrates the skull, parts of it breaks apart, and so there are oftentimes pieces,
Fragments, yeah.
fragments and parts of the bullet in the head. And this little girl taught me so much, because she did survive, and she's back at school, and you wouldn't, you can look on her Facebook and everything, and you wouldn't even know she was ever shot. And I think in general, children do a lot better than adults. One, the brain heals better, number one. But number two, they have this intrinsic hope and belief that everything will get better. And so that's one example. I've treated many children with brain tumors, and they're just such strong warriors. They're just just you have to admire them. And there are a lot of neurosurgeons that just won't treat these kids. They just can't. You have the toughest, these tough looking people, and it's hard when you deal with this. And my all time, like, one of my patients that's closest to my heart, her name is Margaret, and she had a glioblastoma, and she came in after I was in New York and New Jersey at the time. She was volunteering in Superstorm Sandy to help. She got a headache. She came in, and she did have a tumor, and we all thought it was benign. And it was a very challenging tumor. And I said, you know what? I was in New Jersey. I said, go to these bigger hospitals. So I sent her to, I won't say the name, but these big programs, very famous programs, and no one would touch it. So it was too dangerous to operate. So one day she comes back to the ER, and that it had hemorrhaged, the tumor hemorrhaged. Now it had to come out.
Oh, jeez.
And she's in my hospital. So it comes down to me, right? And
Because everything you do has to be in the hospital. This isn't outpatient
well, most of this kind of
procedures.
thing.
Yeah.
But I was kind of hoping that one of the big shots would have done this tumor.
Yes.
So I took her to the operating room, and I took this tumor out. It was a thalamic tumor. And I thought it was a benign tumor. We all thought it was. And it came back a malignant brain tumor. And it was so heartbreaking. And she was such a good, beautiful little girl. And she did very well with the surgery. They told her she would never wake up. And she, again, miracle, she did well. I got the tumor out. And she went on to have treatment. And I got her into Make-A-Wish. And I also was involved with the Broadway community at the time. And I got her to see a show. And I asked her, what's your wish? And her wish was to have lunch with me.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, that's your wish? Like, you can meet anybody. Like, no, doctor, Dr. Lauren, I just want to have lunch with you. So we had lunch together. And then a couple months later, the tumor came back, and we were in the hospital and knew she was going to die. And I told the parents, I had to tell them the news, and they didn't cry. And her mother looked right at me and said, well, they were very religious, and they said, God would never give us anything we couldn't handle. And I will never forget that. These are just lessons that you learn.
Yes.
And she went on to die, and her parents went on, and she had a brother, and I never forget her. I never forget any of my patients, and they all just support what I'm doing. When you wonder, like, why work so hard or why do this, it's to give someone like that little girl a chance, and she lived over a year, and so those are the victories.
Incredible chances that you take also in the knowing in such an important position that every time people's lives are in your hands. And what I really respect and admire most, and I see and I experienced, and I'm grateful to call you a friend, is your humility. So people talk about, a lot of doctors, especially surgeons, with a God complex. And so the ego is really there, just like the gentleman you referred to that had made sort of inappropriate advances to you, and what he wanted to, the action he took as a result. And so how do you find that you have stayed humble?
So I think when you do a job like I do, where the burden of these life and death decisions are just moment to moment. It's like a friend of mine was a musician. I said, what if you got on stage and you hit a wrong chord and someone in the audience died? Or maybe you didn't hit the right note when you sang and someone else forgot who their children are. So in order to be able to act in a situation where there's so much risk, there are different ways that people can go. And one way is a God complex. I'm just so great, and whatever I do is the way it is, and that's a very easy out to just say, I'm just wonderful. I think that begets problems because you need humility to understand when you make a mistake or a bad judgment or a bad call, or maybe there's a better call to make. And so I think that the doctors that are truly amazing, like Fred, have compassion and empathy, and you have to realize that you're not perfect. And what I did personally was I lived by a code. And I have a code where I don't lie, I don't cheat, I live an honorable life. And in that respect, I know that whatever I do the best that I could do. And I think that those
integrity.
Integrity and honesty, looking at yourself honestly. So I think there's two ways
The
to
truth
go.
of your strengths and weaknesses, also knowing thyself.
Yeah, yeah, and forgiving. It's also like forgiving yourself for things, which is very hard to do, especially when you're a doctor, because you have lawyers, you have administrators, you have a lot of people that want you to be perfect. And I think we talk ourselves into being perfect. And the other thing is to be open to criticism and to work together with other people and to be transparent about your results, about your techniques. And the truly amazing physicians and neurosurgeons are the ones that do that. And that's how they teach. So I guess what I'm saying is that being a great doctor has to, it's like a puzzle. It has to go with being a good person, with being a spiritual person, with being a compassionate person. That is a multifaceted approach to life.
And bringing that into the practice,
Exactly.
of what you're doing. It's just fascinating. And so, where are we going today? We have so many changes and evolutions with our healthcare system today, and a lot of problems, a lot of challenging problems that you've experienced too. Working again, your surgeries are mostly ER trauma or scheduled, but in the hospital. Not we're not doing plastic surgery in outpatient
Right.
facilities. So, where are we going? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, healthcare has really been decimated. Um, we don't have healthcare anymore. It's very difficult. Doctors have sadly taken a back seat, and we allow the government to control what we do. We allow insurance companies to dictate to us who we can operate on, what surgeries we can do, and even the hospital administrators. They have all these tools to silence doctors. We saw this with COVID when physicians were like, well, some things don't really make sense. Can we discuss them? And they were shut down. And unfortunately, there are a lot of tools and laws that have been, in place to silence doctors. And I think we are at a crossroads right now, where we either keep cowering down and just follow the pack, and allow our power to be taken. Now when you go to a primary care doctor, you may not even see a doctor. You'll see a nurse practitioner and primary care is the front lines. Like that's where you can tell a patient of yours has a little facial droop, before they have a stroke or a tumor. Like primary care is where you get the prevention, where you can catch cancers before they metastasize. And we don't have that anymore. It's a numbers game. And we can't even, like, what other business can you not even set your fees? They're dictated to us. So like to do brain surgery or take out a brain tumor for like 10 hours on a patient with Medicaid, you get paid as a neurosurgeon less than minimum wage that someone makes at McDonald's.
It's insane.
And it's not sustainable. And, now doctors are so sad, that the Congress has decreased Medicare payments. And Medicare is the same way. It's a very minimal payment. And so what has to happen now is that doctors have to start to get a little bit out of just the practice of medicine. Now we have to save medicine. And so that's where I am right now, is to help lead doctors to save medicine in our country. We need to take back the control of medical decisions, again, make it between patients and doctors, and not give away our power and our freedoms to bureaucracies. And it's a massive undertaking, but if doctors don't stand up and start to lead, we're not going to have health care anymore that's of any quality.
Yeah, so are the numbers down in terms of enrollment into med school? I don't know anything about the statistics, but it's not a real incentive to go through all of that for how our medical system.
Yeah, that's very true. And so what we're seeing is not necessarily the numbers being down, as far as I know, but the quality of applicants and the criteria for admitting people into medical school as well as graduating. And the biggest problem that I won't talk about, there's a lot of different reasons.
Understand.
But the biggest issue that we have is that we don't have ownership anymore. We're not teaching critical thinking. When you look at the universities now and they're like protests and all different things, and you actually ask them like, what are you protesting? What do the words that you're saying mean? They don't know. And we're unfortunately creating these new doctors that aren't inquisitive, that aren't curious, that kind of do what they're told. And so I think what we need to do is, at a very fundamental level back in the universities and as parents too, is to teach curiosity and this non-acceptance of what you're told, but to really think and to research for yourself and then come up with an opinion. So I think we're kind of making like zombies of people. So I think
We're letting Chat GPT tell us how to think.
I think that's the beauty of your movement, is that each of us can be leaders, like wherever we are, in high school, in professional sports, in amateur sports, in teaching, as teachers, there's opportunities to lead. And what we need to do is to get back to our roots and back to questioning authority and questioning what we're told and not rebelling, but just making decisions for ourselves now instead of being told what to think.
That critical thinking aspect. And you spoke of faith. You spoke of that being, understanding that you are being guided, a sense of, and having a faith, and knowing that, you're not perfect and you are going to make mistakes, and to don't quit, and your failures do not define you. You know what your intention is. And so faith is a bit lost also. I mean, we have wars going on and a lot of wars within our own country and individuals at war within themselves.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's all the war within ourselves.
Yes.
Because if you don't love yourself, you can't love your neighbor. When in my position, I see people. I treat all different kinds of people. I remember when I was in Texas, there was a Ku Klux Klan rally, and one of the Klan's people was injured, and I had to treat him. And my nurse was an African American, and we in trauma you take off the clothes, and there's a big swastika tattooed on his chest.
Wow.
We just looked at each other and we're like, we do what we got to do. And it was really amazing because me and also the trauma team, we saved this man's life. And when he woke up from his coma, he saw my last name and he knew I was Jewish, and he said, "Why did you take care of me?" And he's like, "You saw my chest, right?" I said, "I did." I said, "Because that's who I am. That's not who, you are who you are. I am who I am." And it was the most incredible thing because he came back to see me in the clinic, and he started having the tattoo removed.
Wow, Lauren.
So I kind of think that, like, if you put it out there and just be compassionate, be loving, and do what you can.
You treated him as a human.
Right.
Not that he was as a man who's subscribing to
right
or against.
Right. And as a physician, you don't judge. Like I've treated gangsters, I've treated murderers, rapists. Like, it's not me to judge. It's me to do what I know is right for me, which is to fulfill my Hippocratic oath.
Thank you. Wow. And so, Lauren, you are beginning to create, and I support you so much in this, white coat warriors. Yes. White coat warriors, and we'll be calling on many doctors to be a stand for the things that you lead, to lead what they live also. And because if we stay silent, things won't change.
Correct. And it's not just rising as doctors; it's rising as people. As becoming back, claim our freedom and who we are again, and save medicine. So yeah, the White Coat Warrior Project and the White Coat Resistance is something that I'm dedicating my life to, in addition to surgery, to try to help save our healthcare system.
Well, I definitely support you in that, however I can, and you know that, and we are all in this together. I'm just so impressed and admired, inspired, and I admire you so much. You are an example for me, and so we are all looking for leaders. We are all looking for those that we can look to as examples of not to quit and have faith and hope and exercising our free will that God gave us to lead our best lives and take a stand. Take a stand for what you believe in. And that resilience is big. I am taking away so much. You know, curiosity. I am the curiosity queen, the curious cat. And my mother had always told me, you learn by being about other people. Ask questions. You already know about you, so ask questions of other people to learn. And oftentimes, people in relationships, intimate partnerships within your own family, your friendships, we think we know everything. We get to know people, and there's always more. There's always more to know, to learn, to understand, because the only thing that's constant is change. So we are growing and evolving. And so each time I'm with you, and whether we are, you know, we're at an event or we're grabbing a bite to eat, and even today, I learn more and take away more from what you are willing to share, and generous with your sharing.
Thank you. I'll leave you with one quote that I think really just says it all. It's just this like mantra that I've repeated in my own head, and I transmit that to other people that I've trained. Is there, but for the grace of God, go I. And if you just look,
Repeat that again louder.
There, but for the grace of God, go I.
Beautiful.
I think if you live by that, you have a fruitful life.
Dr. Lauren Schwartz, thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you. Wow, that was amazing. I'm so grateful that I can call Dr. Lauren Schwartz a friend. She is a fellow woman warrior who does, in fact, lead what she lives. You best look out for her in her white coat warrior and white coat resistance movement. So a top female neurosurgeon. Tune in. You won't want to miss any of it. Thank you so much for tuning in to Lead What You Live podcast with Tina Lizzio.